Africa is witnessing yet another shocking chapter in its long history of foreign exploitation. Captain Ibrahim Traoré and many Pan-African leaders are in disbelief as the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, strikes a controversial deal with the United States. President Félix Tshisekedi has reportedly agreed to hand over control of his nation's priceless mineral resources to the US in exchange for military protection against Rwanda-backed M23 rebels. The move raises alarming concerns about Africa's sovereignty, economic independence, and the continued neocolonial grip of Western powers on the continent. Will the DRC remain trapped in this cycle of dependency, or can it follow the path of self-reliance championed by Captain Traoré? This decision not only impacts the DRC, but sets a precedent for other resource-rich African nations facing similar dilemmas. The stakes have never been higher, as this deal could determine the DRC's long-term stability and economic future. With mounting pressure from both internal and external forces, will Tshisekedi stand firm or reconsider his approach? Stay tuned as we unpack this critical issue. But first, if you believe Africa must control its own resources and future, subscribe to the African Web and hit the notification bell. The Democratic Republic of Congo, a nation sitting on an estimated $24 trillion worth of untapped mineral wealth, finds itself at a dangerous crossroads. For decades, the country has suffered from political instability, foreign interference, and armed conflicts fueled by the very resources that should have made it a global powerhouse. Now, President Tshisekedi's administration is looking to the US for military support in battling the persistent threat of the M23 rebel group, which is widely believed to be backed by Rwanda. But at what cost? The deal reportedly offers the US exclusive access to the DRC's critical minerals, resources that power the world's tech industry, from electric vehicle batteries to advanced weaponry. Instead of leveraging these assets for national development, Tshisekedi is willing to trade them for military backing, a move eerily reminiscent of past colonial arrangements where African leaders surrendered economic control in exchange for temporary security. If history has taught us anything, it is that foreign intervention rarely benefits the host nation in the long run. The DRC risks falling into the same trap that has left many African nations impoverished despite their immense natural wealth. Will this agreement bring peace, or will it deepen the cycle of dependency and exploitation that has plagued the DRC for decades? More importantly, does Tshisekedi have an alternative plan if this deal fails to bring the promised stability? Many critics argue that without a long-term vision, the DRC is setting itself up for continued subjugation under foreign economic interests. The question remains, will the Congolese people accept this arrangement, or will they rise in opposition to demand a different path? While Tshisekedi turns to Western powers, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso has chosen a radically different path. Since assuming leadership, Traoré has prioritized national sovereignty, resource control, and military self-sufficiency. Instead of outsourcing security to foreign powers, he has focused on strengthening Burkina Faso's military capabilities, forging alliances with neighboring African nations, and ensuring that the country's mineral wealth benefits its people first. Unlike the DRC, which continues to seek Western assistance, Burkina Faso has actively reduced foreign dependency. The government has moved to reclaim control over its gold mines, ensuring that profits are reinvested into national development projects rather than being siphoned off by foreign corporations. By prioritizing local industries and encouraging domestic investment, Burkina Faso is gradually breaking free from economic shackles imposed by neocolonial forces. This model of self-reliance and economic nationalism stands in stark contrast to the DRC's reliance on external military aid in exchange for resource control. The question remains, why isn't the DRC following Traoré's example? Is it truly impossible to build a strong African defense force without Western interference? Or is there an internal resistance within the DRC's leadership that favors foreign interests over national prosperity? The success of Burkina Faso demonstrates that African nations can thrive without relying on Western intervention if they have the political will to do so. Could Tshisekedi learn from Traoré's approach and implement similar policies, or is the DRC too entangled in foreign influence to break free? The stark difference between Tshisekedi's approach and Traoré's vision highlights a fundamental debate about Africa's future. Should African leaders continue to rely on Western intervention, or should they take full control of their resources and security? Tshisekedi's decision reflects a long-standing pattern in African politics, where leaders exchange economic power for military support. This pattern has left many nations dependent on foreign aid, unable to dictate their own futures. Traoré, on the other hand, represents a new generation of African leaders who reject this model of dependency. By nationalizing resources and prioritizing self-reliance, Burkina Faso is proving that Africa does not need Western powers to dictate its destiny. The continent is rich in resources and potential. The only thing missing is the political will to harness them for the benefit of its own people. If Burkina Faso, with fewer resources than the DRC, can pursue self-sufficiency, what is stopping the Congolese government from doing the same? The challenge is not just external pressure, but also internal political dynamics that may prioritize personal gain over national interests. This struggle between short-term security and long-term independence will define the future trajectory of many African nations. Could a unified African front against external control be the key to true liberation? Or will individual nations continue to fall into the same trap? The time has come for African leaders to wake up. The DRC's deal with the US is not just about minerals. It is about Africa's continued submission to external control. If leaders like Captain Traoré can take a stand for self-reliance, why can't others follow suit? The West will always seek to exploit Africa's resources for its own gain, but it is up to African nations to decide whether they will allow it. Burkina Faso has shown that self-sufficiency is possible. The DRC and other African nations must take inspiration from Traoré's leadership and prioritize national sovereignty over short-term military aid. Only through true independence can Africa rise as a global power. If African nations unite under a shared vision of economic and political autonomy, the continent can redefine its role in global affairs. Do you think Tshisekedi will reconsider his decision? Or is the DRC heading further into Western control? How can the people of the DRC push for a more independent path? Africa's future depends on the choices we make today. The time for bold action is now. The decisions made today will determine the fate of the next generation. Will Africa seize this opportunity, or will history repeat itself once again? Let us know in the comments. And before you go, make sure to like this video, share it with others who need to hear this message, and subscribe to the African Web for more eye-opening content.